Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Marians and merry men, welcome to another episode of Clarifying Catholicism. You're watching part 5 of a series on the history of the Ecumenical Councils according to the Catholic Church. Today we are covering the Council of Ephesus. Much of this information was gathered from Joseph Kelly's The Ecumenical Councils of the Catholic Church, a history. So if you want an in-depth dive into these topics, make sure to pick up a copy of his book. To see the rest of our episodes, check our playlist in the description. Without further ado, on to the show. The end of the 4th century marked some pretty massive political shifts in the Roman Empire. As emperors gained more power in the east, the western half of the empire rapidly declined. This is largely because in 378, a German tribe, the Visigoths, invaded western Rome, sacking the city of Rome in 410. Fortunately for the city, these invaders had no plans of lingering, so they moved through the city to their next target. By this point, each half of the empire largely looked after itself, both politically and theologically. This, of course, led to some stark divisions between East and Western theology yet again. The lingering question on everyone's mind after Nicaea and Constantinople was, well, if Jesus Christ is God, how could he be both human and divine? Just as Arius, in our episode on Nicaea, denied the divinity of Christ to avoid polytheism, some Christians denied the humanity of Christ to avoid his divinity being tainted by the evils that came with being human. You see, in Greek philosophy, particularly Platonism, the soul was seen as pure and perfect, whereas the body was seen as kind of messy and evil. But the question arose that if he was only seemingly human, how could he have suffered, died, and risen from the dead with a human body? A second answer came from a Greek-informed group called the Gnostics. In their opinion, Jesus had both human and divine sides, but the human side was inferior to that of the divine. This idea was unacceptable to Jewish Christians who did not see the human flesh as intrinsically evil. In fact, while many Greek philosophers had no problems with the notion of eternal life in an immaterial realm of souls, their problem was with the notion of a bodily resurrection. After the Council of Constantinople, the city of Constantinople fell into a series of rather unfortunate political events. First, the emperor made the theologian, John Chrysostom, the patriarch, or head bishop, of the city. Chrysostom was a pious man and an excellent theologian, but not a very good politician. As we can see throughout history, piety and politics rarely mesh very well. Upon coming into office, he forced 6 bishops out of the office for impiety and criticized Bishop Theophilus, Patriarch of Alexandria, for mistreating monks from Egypt. Upon learning about corruption in the royal courts, Chrysostom referred to the emperor's wife as Jezebel, the most wicked queen in all of the Old Testament. The emperor was not exactly thrilled about this, and Bishop Theophilus from Alexandria convinced the emperor to depose and exile him. However, the day Chrysostom departed, a large earthquake rocked the city. The emperor interpreted this as a sign of divine wrath, and Chrysostom was returned. Chrysostom, not exactly the best politician still, declared victory over Theophilus publicly, whom he branded as the new Pharaoh, referring of course to Pharaoh of the Old Testament who enslaved Israel. He also upgraded the emperor's wife's name from Jezebel to Herodias, the woman responsible for the beheading of John the Baptist. Shortly after this, he was exiled again, where he died. Rome reacted strongly against Chrysostom's treatment by excommunicating, or breaking relations with, all parties involved with the exile of Chrysostom. After Theophilus' death, the bishops of Antioch and Constantinople urged the new Patriarch of Alexandria, who was conveniently Theophilus' nephew named Cyril, to recognize the legitimacy of Chrysostom's bishopric. Cyril refused, claiming he would rather put Judas back in the company of the apostles. So basically what we have here is a conflict between Alexandria and Constantinople. The next part of the story introduces the sorry figure of Nestorius. In the year 425, the emperor appointed a new bishop to Constantinople named Nestorius, an Antiochian monk. Nestorius saw how many Christians in his diocese referred to Saint Mary as Theotokos, or Mother of God. Having not been familiar with the term's history and acceptance by other bishops and theologians, Nestorius condemned the use of this term. This angered several other bishops whom he had arrested and tortured. Why was Nestorius so concerned about calling Mary the Mother of God? Well, as mentioned last episode, the councils of Nicaea and Constantinople may have decided that Jesus is God, but it never really ironed out what that meant for his humanity. To theologians like Nestorius, who wanted to emphasize the separation between Jesus' human side and divine side, Mary could only be the mother of Jesus' human side, so to call her Mother of God was a bit inappropriate. But for Cyril of Alexandria, the unity between Jesus' human and divine sides was so strong that Mary could be called the Mother of God. So he partnered with Rome to condemn Nestorius' teachings. Cyril of Alexandria's campaign against Nestorius and Constantinople was brutal, and the emperor of Constantinople was upset by this. So he called a council for the purpose of condemning Cyril. Little did the emperor know that this plan would backfire. Cyril was clearly the better politician and theologian. The council was held in Ephesus in 431. Even though the council was called by the emperor for the purpose of defending Nestorius, attendees were nothing but hostile to the bishop. One local bishop of Ephesus even refused to let Nestorius attend church. Cyril himself arrived with a band of bodyguard thugs, and before anyone else could get there, he opened the council without them. Nestorius, knowing he was outmatched by his adversaries, refused to attend and was swiftly condemned. When the bishops from Antioch arrived, they asked when the council was starting, just to be told that it had already ended. They were infuriated by this and took Nestorius' side, since remember, Nestorius was originally from Antioch. So, Antioch condemned Cyril. By the time Roman delegates had arrived, there had already been two councils, each which excommunicated the other. Nevertheless, Rome sided with Cyril. So it was Rome and Alexandria versus Constantinople and Antioch. The emperor had had enough of these political games. He arrested both Cyril and Nestorius, brought them to Constantinople. Nestorius, not thinking the emperor would actually take him up on this offer, said he would resign if it meant restoring peace, and the emperor said yes, and accepted Nestorius' resignation. This was still not enough for Cyril. He knew that Nestorius had followers and support, and he wanted them totally extinguished. So, after bribing the imperial family, as well as the emperor's favorite mistress, he had the emperor denounce the name of Nestorius and sent all the pro-Nestorian bishops back to their countries. Then, massive book burnings ensued, where the writings of Nestorius were thrown into fire. The story of Nestorius and Ephesus is honestly tragic. It reflects how many early church councils, though they addressed legitimate theological issues, were spurred by political interests. The worst part is that thousands of years later, Nestorius still has the reputation of either a hostile or stupid heretic. It really puts into perspective of how heretics were often not evil people. So remember, everybody, empathize with these people and hug a heretic today.